Daniel Carter noticed the laugh first. It was sharp and too loud, the kind people use when they want the world to believe they're fine. He stood on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, one hand gripping his car keys, the other holding his phone with a half-written text to the babysitter asking if his daughter was asleep yet. Through the glass, under soft amber lights, he saw his boss sitting across from a man who leaned too close, talking with hands that never seemed to stop moving. Evelyn Moore's shoulders were tight. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Daniel had no reason to be there. None that made sense. He had already picked up Lily's forgotten backpack from daycare, dropped it off at home, and was only passing this block because traffic had forced him to take a detour. Still, his feet had slowed when he recognized Evelyn's profile. Something in his chest tightened, sharp and familiar, like an old bruise pressed too hard. Inside, Evelyn laughed again, louder this time. Her fingers curled around the stem of her wineglass, knuckles pale. The man across from her leaned back, clearly enjoying himself. Daniel watched her glance toward the door, then back at the table, trapped between politeness and discomfort. He told himself to keep walking. For 3 years, Daniel had survived by keeping his head down. Work. Home. Lily. Repeat. No complications. No emotional risks. His life was a narrow bridge suspended over grief, and he crossed it carefully every day. Evelyn Moore was not part of that bridge. She was his boss. She lived in another world, tailored suits, boardroom confidence, a calendar full of meetings and dinners he never attended. She was admired, respected, and untouchable. And yet. Daniel took a breath he hadn't realized he was holding and pushed open the door. The bell chimed softly, cutting through the low murmur of conversation. Evelyn's eyes flicked up. For half a second, surprise crossed her face. Then relief, quick, unguarded, and gone just as fast. "Daniel," she said, standing halfway from her chair. "Is everything okay?" He didn't plan his words. They came from instinct, from something older than fear. "There you are," he said, forcing a small smile. "I've been looking everywhere for you." The man frowned. "Who's this?" Daniel extended his hand, calm and steady. "Daniel Carter. I work with Evelyn. There's an urgent situation, her sister just called." Evelyn blinked. Once. Then she caught on, eyes widening just slightly. "Right," she said quickly, standing fully now. I completely forgot. I'm so sorry." Her date scoffed. "Seriously? We just ordered." "I know," Evelyn said, voice tight. "But family comes first." Daniel didn't wait for permission. He picked up her coat, handed it to her gently, and placed a polite but final nod toward the table. "Thank you for understanding." The man muttered something under his breath as they walked away. Outside, the night air hit them both at once, cool, sharp, freeing. Evelyn exhaled, a long shaky breath she seemed to have been holding all evening. She wrapped her coat around herself and laughed, this time quieter, softer, real. "I can't believe you did that," she said, her voice trembling between humor and disbelief. Daniel shrugged, suddenly aware of his heart pounding. "I hope I didn't overstep." "No," she said quickly. "You didn't. You saved me." They stood there for a moment, the glow from the restaurant spilling onto the sidewalk behind them. Cars passed. Somewhere, a siren wailed in the distance. Life moved on, unaware of the small shift that had just occurred. "I didn't know you were even here," Evelyn added. "I wasn't supposed to be," Daniel admitted. "Traffic. And a hunch." She studied him then, really looked at him. Not the quiet operations manager who never stayed late unless necessary, not the dependable employee who always solved problems without praise, but the man standing in front of her, hands slightly clenched, eyes steady but kind. "Thank you," she said again, softer this time. He nodded. Do you want me to walk you to your car? Yes, she said immediately. Then hesitated. Actually, could we just sit for a minute? They found a bench beneath a flickering street lamp. The silence between them wasn't awkward, just full. Evelyn stared down at her hands. That was a terrible idea, she said. The date. I knew at the moment I sat down. Daniel smiled faintly. Why did you go? She sighed. Because everyone keeps saying I should. Because being alone feels like a failure after a while. He understood that more than he wanted to admit. My wife used to say silence isn't empty, he said quietly. It's just honest. Evelyn's head turned sharply toward him. Used to. Daniel swallowed. He hadn't meant to say that. She passed away. 3 years ago. I'm sorry, Evelyn whispered. He nodded, eyes fixed on the pavement. I have a daughter. Lily. She's 7. Evelyn smiled at that. She must be lucky to have you. He let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. Some days I think it's the other way around. They sat there, two people stripped of titles and expectations, just human in the night. Evelyn hugged her arms around herself. I hate that I was relieved to see you, she admitted. I hate that I needed saving. Daniel turned to her, voice gentle but firm. Everyone does, sometimes. She looked at him then, really looked, and something unspoken passed between them. Not romance. Not yet. Just understanding. His phone buzzed. A message from the babysitter, Lily's asleep. Left the light on like you said. Daniel smiled without realizing it. Evelyn noticed. You should go, she said softly. I should, he agreed. They stood. He walked her to her car, waited until she unlocked it. Before she got in, she paused. Daniel, she said. About tonight, maybe we could talk sometime. Not about work. His heart skipped, then steadied. I'd like that. She smiled, this time without armor, and drove away. Daniel stood there long after her taillights disappeared, unaware that the careful bridge he'd been crossing for years had just widened, ever so slightly, making room for something new. The following week settled into a quiet rhythm that Daniel didn't notice at first, the way you don't notice a wound healing until one morning it hurts a little less. Evelyn didn't mention the restaurant at work. Neither did he. On the surface, everything stayed professional, meetings, emails, deadlines met without drama. But something small had shifted beneath the routine. She smiled more when she passed his desk. He lingered a second longer when she asked him a question. They shared glances that carried weight, then quickly looked away, as if both were afraid of what might happen if they held on too long. The first coffee happened by accident. Daniel was standing in line at the cafe across the street from the office, mentally calculating whether he had time to make it back before his 9 o'clock meeting, when he heard his name. Daniel? He turned. Evelyn stood a few steps behind him, hair loose instead of pulled back, phone tucked under her arm like she wasn't quite sure where to put it. She looked lighter. Less armored. Good morning, she said. Morning, he replied, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. They ordered together. Small talk at first, weather, traffic, the new software rollout everyone hated. When their drinks came, neither of them moved toward the door. So, Evelyn said, wrapping both hands around her cup. How's Lily? The question caught him off guard. She's good. She has a spelling test today. She made me quiz her 5 times last night. Evelyn smiled. Did she ace it? She will, he said without hesitation. There was something in the way he said it, quiet faith, unshakable, that made Evelyn's chest tighten. They sat at a small table by the window. 10 minutes stretched into 20. When Daniel finally checked his watch, he cursed softly. "I'm late." "So am I," Evelyn admitted, glancing at her phone. Then, after a pause, she added, "Worth it." From that day on, the coffees became intentional. They didn't call them that. Sometimes it was walking to a meeting together, or grabbing something quick before the day starts. But they began to talk. About real things. About Evelyn's divorce, spoken carefully, like she was afraid the words might cut if handled too roughly. About Daniel's wife, mentioned in fragments, her laugh, her love of old movies, the way she used to hum while folding laundry. Evelyn never rushed him. She never asked questions he wasn't ready to answer. She listened, the kind of listening that made space instead of filling it. One evening, Daniel's phone rang while he was still at the office. He answered with a frown, already bracing himself. "Daddy?" Lily's small voice came through, shaky. "The babysitter says my tummy hurts." Daniel was out of his chair before the call ended. "I need to go," he said, already grabbing his coat. Evelyn stood too. "Is she okay?" "I hope so." "Go," she said. "I've got everything here." He hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you." An hour later, he was sitting on the edge of Lily's bed, rubbing slow circles on her back while she curled against him, warm and sleepy. The fever turned out to be nothing serious, but Daniel stayed anyway, because that's what he did. The knock on the door startled him. He frowned, checked the time, and went to open it. Evelyn stood on his porch, holding a small paper bag. "I hope this isn't weird," she said quickly. "But I remembered you saying she likes soup when she doesn't feel well." Daniel stared at her, stunned. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to," she said simply. Inside, Lily peeked around the corner, eyes curious. "Hi," Evelyn said softly, lowering herself to Lily's level. "I'm Evelyn." Lily studied her seriously. "Are you Daddy's boss?" Daniel winced. Evelyn laughed gently. "Yes. But I promise I'm nice." Lily nodded, satisfied. "Okay." They sat together at the small kitchen table. Lily sipped soup while Evelyn listened to her talk about school, about her best friend, about the class hamster who bit someone's finger. Daniel watched from the counter, heart full and uneasy all at once. This was dangerous, he knew that. Letting someone step into this sacred, fragile space he had built with his daughter. Letting himself imagine things. When Evelyn left, she hugged Lily gently. "Feel better, okay?" Lily smiled. "You can come again." Evelyn glanced at Daniel, eyes warm. "If that's okay with your dad." Daniel nodded, unable to speak. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Daniel sat alone in the dark living room, the house quiet around him. He thought of his wife, of the promise he'd made at her hospital bedside, whispered through tears. That he would protect Lily. That he wouldn't let anything break what they had left. And yet, Evelyn didn't feel like a threat. She felt like warmth after a long winter. Weeks passed. Then months. They didn't rush. They couldn't. But they found themselves leaning on each other in small ways, shared dinners when work ran late, phone calls during long commutes, moments of silence that didn't demand explanation. Still, Daniel held back. Every time his heart edged closer, guilt pulled it tight again. Loving Evelyn felt like stepping away from his wife's memory, even though he knew, logically, that wasn't true. Evelyn sensed the distance. She didn't push. But it hurt. One night, after Lily had gone to bed, Daniel received a message. "Did I do something wrong?" He stared at the screen, the words blurring. "No," he typed. Then erased it. "I don't know how to do this." The reply came quickly. "Maybe we figure it out together." Daniel closed his eyes, breath catching. Outside, rain began to fall softly against the windows, steady and patient. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone in the dark. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He lay on his back, staring at the ceiling while the rain whispered against the windows, the house breathing quietly around him. Lily slept down the hall, one arm flung over her pillow the way she always did. The clock ticked. Minutes stretched. Memories came uninvited. His wife's smile. Her hand in his. The promise he'd made when her breathing had grown shallow and afraid. Take care of her. Be strong. He had been strong. So strong it had started to feel like stone. When morning came, he made Lily breakfast, tied her shoes, walked her to school. He smiled when she waved goodbye. Only when she was gone did he allow his shoulders to sag. At work, Evelyn was already in her office. The door was closed. Daniel stared at it longer than necessary. By lunchtime, he hadn't responded to her message. By mid-afternoon, his chest felt tight enough to crack. Finally, just before 5, he knocked. "Come in," she said. Evelyn stood by the window, city light washing over her face. She looked tired. Guarded. When she turned and saw him, hope flickered, and she quickly tried to hide it. "I owe you an answer," Daniel said quietly. She nodded. "Okay." He stayed standing, hands clasped in front of him like he was bracing for impact. "I don't pull away because of you. I pull away because I'm afraid." Her eyes softened but didn't interrupt. "I lost my wife," he continued, voice low. "And part of me still believes that if I let myself love again, I'm somehow leaving her behind. Like I'm breaking a promise." Evelyn swallowed. "And what do you want?" The question landed heavy. "I want peace," he said honestly. "For Lily. For myself." And, his voice faltered. He took a breath. "And I want you. I just don't know how to want something without feeling like I'm stealing it." Evelyn crossed the room slowly, stopping a careful distance away. "Daniel," she said, her voice trembling, "I don't need you to be fearless. I just need you to be honest." He looked at her then, really looked, and saw not a boss, not a perfect woman with everything together, but someone standing on her own edge, risking the fall. "I can't promise forever," he said. She nodded. "Neither can I." "I can promise to try," he said. "And to stop running." A tear slipped down her cheek. She laughed softly through it. "That's all I was hoping for." They didn't kiss. Not then. Instead, she rested her forehead against his chest, and he let his hands settle on her back, tentative, reverent. It felt like crossing a line drawn in chalk, delicate, but not forbidden. The first kiss came weeks later, on a quiet evening when Lily was asleep and the house was filled with the low hum of the dishwasher. It was gentle. Careful. Like both of them were aware of how much it mattered. Months passed. There were challenges. Awkward moments. Conversations about boundaries and fear and patience. But there was also laughter, real, unguarded laughter, around the dinner table. Evelyn learned Lily's routines, her moods, her favorite bedtime stories. Lily learned that Evelyn always remembered extra napkins and never forgot to ask how her day was. One night, after Lily had fallen asleep on the couch between them, Evelyn whispered, "She's incredible." Daniel smiled, eyes soft. "So are you." He didn't say it often, but when he did, he meant it with his whole heart. A year later, on a warm afternoon, Daniel stood in the schoolyard watching Lily run toward him, her backpack bouncing. She threw her arms around his waist. "Guess what?" she said breathlessly. "Evelyn's coming to the recital tonight." "I know," he said, smiling. "She said she wouldn't miss it for anything." Daniel looked up and saw Evelyn waiting by the fence, waving. She caught his eye and smiled, the same smile she'd worn the night he'd stepped into that restaurant, only now it was unafraid. Later that evening, as Lily stood on stage singing slightly off-key but with full confidence, Daniel felt something settle deep in his chest. Not guilt. Not fear. Gratitude. Afterward, as they walked home together under a sky washed with stars, Evelyn slipped her hand into his. Daniel squeezed back. Love hadn't arrived loudly. It hadn't demanded or rushed or rescued. It had waited. And when he was finally ready to see it, it was already there, standing beside him, steady and real, proof that even after loss, life could still open its arms and say, "You're allowed to be happy again."